It has been missing for years, but a key detail in a passenger's final message can shock even the best experts.
One of aviation's greatest mysteries could soon be solved with a new
That's
search.
a 10-year mystery that needs to be solved.
This was not a voice call or a normal text, but a series of encrypted files sent to a research satellite. Scientists have spent years trying to figure out what was in those packets, and the results are finally in. They found audio that no one was ever supposed to hear, and maps that lead to a secret military zone. That is putting it lightly. And the truth about the final moments of those 239 people is finally coming to light.
Breaking news tonight, a Malaysia Airlines flight.
MH370.
Flight MH370
disappeared en route to Beijing.
70, we are ready, requesting flight number 310 to Beijing. Malaysia 370.
Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Vanishing act over the deep blue. At exactly 1:19 in the morning on March 8, 2014, the co-pilot of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 said his last words to the ground. It was a normal good night that sounded like every other flight in the sky. But 2 minutes later, the plane did not just fly away. It turned into a ghost. It vanished from civilian screens over the South China Sea. And the silence that followed was deafening. There were no screams over the radio and no emergency buttons pushed. 1 second, a giant plane with 239 people was cruising at 35,000 feet. And the next second, it was just gone. People all over the world were glued to their TVs, wondering how a modern jet could just blink out of existence. Early on, everyone thought it must have been a fire or a giant engine failure. But there was no debris found where the plane was supposed to be. Investigators were scratching their heads because the plane's transponder, which tells people where the plane is, was turned off manually. This was not a glitch. Someone had to reach up and flip a switch. Military radar later showed that the plane did not crash right away. Instead, it made a sharp turn and flew back across Malaysia. And it was dodging cities and staying away from places where it could be easily seen. This was a giant Boeing 777 flying like a fighter jet in the middle of the night. Ships from dozens of countries started looking in the water, but they were looking in the wrong place. They spent weeks searching the South China Sea while the plane was actually heading for the deep, cold waters of the Indian Ocean. Every day that passed made the mystery feel more impossible. The pieces of the plane did eventually wash up on beaches thousands of miles away, like bits of a wing or a flap. But those pieces did not tell the whole story. They only proved the plane hit the water. They did not say why or how it got there. For 10 years, the world lived with a giant hole in the story. But the truth was hiding in a tiny bit of data that everyone thought was just trash. But the sky was not empty, and something was watching the plane from the dark. To digital fingerprints in the dark. While the world was looking at the ocean, a company called Inmarsat was looking at their satellites. Even though the plane's radios were off, the satellite system kept pinging the aircraft every hour. It was like a digital heartbeat. These pings proved the plane kept flying for 7 long hours after it disappeared from radar. This changed the search area to a giant arc in the southern Indian Ocean, which is one of the loneliest places on Earth. But these pings were very simple. They only told us the plane was still alive, not what was happening inside. However, in 2024, experts found something much more detailed. It was a signal from a passenger's phone that everyone had ignored. They thought it was just a failed upload, but it was actually a highly secret message. The phone belonged to an American man named Benjamin Waters. He was a systems engineer who worked on secret plane tech for the government. Now, he was not even supposed to be on that flight, and he booked his seat at the very last second. His phone sent a file that was locked behind 6 layers of super-strong secret code. This was not a normal text message to a friend. It was a system dump that his phone was programmed to do if things went wrong. It was sent at 2:37 in the morning, which was over 80 minutes after the plane went dark. The phone was not using a normal cell tower, and it found a passing research satellite that was meant to track the weather and sent the data through it. Scientists spent months trying to break the code. When they finally did, they found a map of everything the plane was doing. It showed the air pressure in the cabin was going up and down in a scary way. It showed the electricity in the plane was spiking like someone was trying to hack the computers. Benjamin Waters knew how planes worked better than almost anyone, and he was using his phone to record the crime as it happened. This was not a malfunction. It was a fight for the soul of the plane. The code was broken, and what it said would make anyone's blood run cold. Ghosts in the machine. Inside the secret file Benjamin Waters left behind, there was a 6-second audio clip. When the scientists first played it, they heard nothing but static. But after using special tools to clean the sound, they found something that made them freeze. And it was the sound of a person breathing. It was slow, heavy, and very focused. There was no sound of engines in the background and no people crying. It was just the sound of a man trying to stay calm while his world was falling apart. The experts checked the sound against old recordings of Benjamin Waters, and it was a perfect match. He was alive in the back of the plane while it was flying through the dark. The data showed that the temperature in the cabin had dropped by 20 degrees in less than 2 minutes. This usually happens when the air is being sucked out of the plane. The file also showed that the oxygen in the back of the plane had been turned off on purpose. This means the passengers were being put to sleep while someone else was in control. The telemetry logs were even more disturbing. They showed that the autopilot was not flying the plane anymore. Someone had pushed a manual override button. This is a very big deal because it means the plane did not just drift until it ran out of gas. It was being steered by a hand. The file had a small note typed into it that said "not autopilot" and "manual override." This was Benjamin's final testimony. He was watching the screens and seeing that the plane was being forced to go somewhere it did not belong. The file recorded every turn and every dip in altitude. It showed the plane was staying at a specific height to avoid being seen by military radar. This was a professional move. Whoever was flying that plane knew exactly how to hide a giant jet from the entire world. The breathing on the tape gets faster at the very end, right before the signal cuts out. It was the sound of someone who knew the end was coming, but wanted to make sure the truth survived. Sound was not the only thing they found. They found a map to a hidden grave. A map to nowhere. The very end of the decoded message had a list of numbers. At first, the scientists thought they were just more code, but then they realized they were latitude and longitude coordinates. These numbers pointed to a spot deep in the southern Indian Ocean. But here is the thing that is really strange. That spot is in a sonar exclusion zone. This is a place where the American, Australian, and British navies go to test secret underwater gear. It is a place where civilian boats are not allowed to go. When the search for the plane first started in 2014, this exact area was skipped. No one looked there. Official maps said the plane was much further north, but Benjamin's coordinates put the plane right in the middle of this secret zone. If the plane is there, It means it was flown into a place where it could never be found by normal sonar. It was like the plane was being guided into a black hole, and this discovery led investigators back to an old clue from the pilot's house. Captain Zahari Shah had a flight simulator in his basement. Years ago, the FBI found a path he had practiced that went into the Indian Ocean. At the time, they said it was just a hobby. But when you put Benjamin's coordinates on top of the pilot's simulator path, they match almost perfectly. Both paths show the plane making a long turn and then doing a slow, controlled glide into the water. This was not a crash, and it was a landing on the waves. The data shows the plane was slowing down and leveling off many times. This is what pilots do when they want to land on the water without breaking the plane into a million pieces. They wanted the plane to sink in one big piece so it would stay hidden forever. The coordinates Benjamin left behind were his way of pointing a finger at the truth from the bottom of the sea. The pilot's home held a secret that the government tried to bury forever. Shadow games and silent truths. In 2025, a new audit of old computer servers in Malaysia found something that was never supposed to be seen. It was a folder labeled Anomaly. Inside was a memo from just 30 hours after the plane disappeared. It showed that the government had already caught the signal from Benjamin Waters' phone. They knew about the message, the breathing, and the coordinates 10 years ago. But the memo said they chose to label it as a false alarm because they did not want people to panic. They hid the evidence that proved the plane was hijacked by code. This means that for a whole decade, the families were told lies, while the truth was sitting on a hard drive in a basement. Some people think there was even more going on. There are whispers of something called Project Eclipse, which was a military test to see if a plane could be hidden from radar using special signals. The flight path of Malaysia Airlines. Flight 370 went right through the area where this test was supposedly happening. If the plane accidentally became part of a military test, it would explain why so many governments wanted to keep it a secret. It would explain why the search zones were moved away from the real coordinates. Benjamin Waters was a man who knew too much, and he used his final seconds to make sure the silence did not last forever. And he left a trail of digital breadcrumbs that took a decade to find. Now that we have the coordinates and the logs, the world has to decide if it is ready to look for the truth in that secret corner of the ocean. The mystery is no longer about where the plane went, but why it was taken there, and who was really pulling the strings from the shadows. Could a secret military test really be the reason 239 people vanished into the deep ocean? Does this passenger's message finally solve the mystery, or just start a new one? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's biggest mysteries.